Well, it is 1 o'clock. So without further ado, let's answer some E2 visa questions. So Anon has one. Let me read that out loud and then I'll answer the best I can. Does all the money already need to be invested before the day of application, or can you show proof of funds and then apply with a plan to invest them? So the answer is the money needs to be spent. So what the consulate says, or how the government describes that, is that the money must be at risk. Okay. Because what they don't want is that you have all this money in an account and you spend a little bit of it, and then you get the visa and you come to the US and you withdraw all the money, and then that's the end of that. That is what they want to avoid. So when you apply, the investment, the amount that will be considered invested is whatever you have receipts for and bank statements or credit card statements showing that you paid those receipts. So if you have $200,000 in an account and you've spent 100,000 of it and you have $100,000 worth of receipts, your investment amount is $100,000. It is not 200,000. Okay. So anything that's left over in the account that maybe you're saying, well, I'm going to use this for, payroll. And I've got some personal expenses or whatever. That's great. And that's fine, but that does not count as part of the investment. Okay. So hopefully that answered it, Anon. Okay. Let's see. So I got a couple of questions actually beforehand. So I will answer some of those. And anybody else that has a question, please feel free to text. Happy to do that. So this one is actually about the substantial investment. What is considered a substantial investment? Okay, so this is a very common question, I think, for probably every attorney who has ever done E2 visas. This is a big one, right? So I will say this. There is no amount that is written anywhere. Nothing. You will never find an amount at all. But we always recommend that you either invest $100,000 or whatever it costs to get the business operational, whichever is more. So let's take an example, right? Let's say that you're going to open, this is always my example. For those of you who have already spoken with me, I probably gave you the same example, but let's say that you're going to open an accounting firm in Lincoln, Nebraska, okay? Very low cost of living. You can get a lot of stuff for cheap in Nebraska. It's an accounting firm, so you don't have any inventory. You don't have all types of stuff you really don't have, right? In that case, I would still recommend that you invest $100,000. Okay. Now, let's take another example. What if you're going to buy an operational Mexican food restaurant in San Antonio, Texas? If it's operational and it's successful, you might be investing $400,000, $500,000. I'm not sure, right? You get some sort of appraisal on that business and then you pay for the value, the fair market value of the business. So that's just kind of an example of when you would invest 100,000 and when you may have to invest more than that. So don't ever think that it's just $100,000. So no matter what business I buy, I invest $100,000 and I'm good. No, it's a proportionality test. So the more expensive the business, the more you have to invest. The cheaper the business, the less you have to invest. But in no case do we ever recommend investing less than 100,000. So the reason for that is a couple reasons, actually. First of all, it makes you look like a much more serious investor and serious applicant. So you might get up to the window to do that interview, and the 4 people before you doing E2 visas have invested $250,000 maybe. You don't want to come up there with 65,000, right? Now you just look like, oh, is that really substantial? Because substantial is in the eye of the beholder, who is the consular officer. So we just want to make it very easy to say yes. So number one, you look more serious. Number two, it's really difficult to argue with someone like, oh, $100,000 isn't that much. That doesn't seem that substantial. That would be a hard argument to make, right? For the consular officer. So there's like a mental shift for people. It's mental, right? It doesn't mean anything, but it is mental that says, wow, this person's invested 6 figures in this business. That's substantial. And our goal as a law firm is always to make it easy for the consular officer to say yes. We don't let's do the very minimum of everything we can do and hope for the best. We always say, let's make it easy for them to say yes so we can get in, get our approval, and get on with our lives. That's always our goal. So that's that. Let's see, what do we got here? What types of visas are available for Canadians to immigrate to the US as investors? There's only 2. E2 visa, EB5. Everybody's heard of the EB5, right? That's the green card, minimum investment of 800,000 up to $1 million, or the E2. And here's the good news. Those are the only two available for anybody in the world, right? And some people are not eligible for the E2. We do not handle EB5s, but if you are interested in the EB5, please feel free to reach out. I can always connect you with our colleague Bobby, who does those. No problem. Let's see, licensing costs, monthly business payment, annual insurance, bond. So a lot of stuff can be used. Payroll, we don't use. I'm sorry. Let me read that question out loud. I'm reading it in my mind and answering it today, but let me read it. Are licensing costs, monthly business lease payments, annual insurance premiums, bond costs included as a capital investment spend? The reality is every single business is different and every single business has different expenses. So we have a few rules of thumb. Again, you will never find any documentation that says this counts, this doesn't, except for payroll. So they usually don't like payroll as part of the expenses. So keep that in mind. We have some of our own general rules about what counts and what doesn't count. Generally speaking, we always recommend that every investment that you submit as part of this application is at about $1,000 or more, right? We don't want to submit receipts and things for $38 and things like that. First of all, in most countries, there is a page limit. And so if if you spend $100,000, $42 at a time, we send this application like this, right? And in most countries, Canada has 70 pages. Spain they had 50, then they had 15. I think now they're at 20 pages. So we really need the broad strokes here. That's number one, why we don't include those types of investment as part of it. And number two is that, again, you look like a much more serious investor when we say, hey, they spent $3,500 on this versus here's $17 they spent renewing a URL or a domain at GoDaddy. We don't really include things like that. Anything else except for payroll, with some exceptions, right? Everything needs to be spent in the US, right? Everything needs to be spent in the US. They're not interested in investment in France or Brazil or Argentina or Australia. They're interested in investment in the United States. That's another one of our rules or our guidelines for our clients. So keep those types of things in mind. So aside from payroll, generally things will count. But again, it has to do with how much you spend on them and when you spend them, right? You have to spend the money before you apply. Otherwise, it's not going to count. So hopefully that helps there. Let's see. Is it okay to apply for the green card lottery and the E2 in the same year? If you wish. You may not want to do the E2 if you're still waiting on the results of the lottery, right? I have had some people that have had applied in the past. I do not know, honestly, and the consulate would never tell us anyway, what kind of access they have to the records for the people who applied anyway. So I'm not sure that they would know unless you were picked. But I think you have to kind of play or hedge your bets a little bit, right? Because if you think, oh, maybe I'm going to know in May if I get this thing, I don't know if you want to spend $100,000 6 months before that. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you want to wait until you get the results before you decide, oh, okay, I didn't get it. Fine. I'll do the E2 instead. Something to that effect. What's the difference between applying for a change of status or applying from your home country? Well, a variety of things. All the requirements are the same. However, we always, I shouldn't say always, but in 95% of the cases, I'm going to recommend that you go to the consulate for a variety of reasons. It really depends on where you're from. You're from Austria. So if you have the visa, you're going to be able to come and go from the United States as frequently as you wish for 5 years. If you apply within the United States, meaning change your status through USCIS, no coming and going. If you leave, you're out, you're done. Can't come back because you have no visa, right? And it's also good for 2 years. So in that instance, I would never, or I can't imagine a scenario. Maybe if you didn't speak English at all, but you're writing the question, so I know you do. Maybe that would be an exception to that rule. There are some countries that have visas that do not have the reciprocity that Austria or Canada has for example. So if you're from someplace like Jordan or Egypt, your visa is only good for 3 months. So it's probably just as good to change status as it is to go to the consulate and get a visa. But if you're from most of Europe, Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, a lot of places like that, they're 5 years. 4 years, even in some cases 2 or 3 years, it's still a much better bet to go to the consulate. Okay, let's see. Uh, we have a current business in Canada. Will it be good to use this business to apply for? Well, I mean, you'll have to do some. You can do a similar business in the United States, right? But you got to launch a U.S. entity and a U.S. business. Now, if you do have a Canadian business and a lot of U.S. clients, or you buy all your inventory from the US, or you sell all your inventory or services to the US, you might be eligible for an E1 visa. So I guess it depends on the type of business, but you have to start a new entity in the United States. It's cool that you have the experience in Canada. That would be great, but you still have to start the US entity. Oh, let's see. What about family members? Do children require additional application? So yeah, great question. And some of these things, I just want to take a moment to say, some of these things we have videos about. So if there are any questions that I don't get to, because there probably would be some questions that I don't get to, you can check out some of the videos, because everything that's been asked so far today is a very frequently asked question. So we do have videos on them. Let's talk a little bit about kids. Your spouse and you can stay in the US on the E2 visa as long as you, your spouse, and the company all remain eligible, meaning you can go and renew. You get renewed every time. You guys could be here for 30 years, 40 years, who knows, whatever, right? Everything's got to continue to remain eligible. You can be here forever, right? For kids, yes, kids can come, kids can go to school. The day they turn 21, kids are out. So a lot of kids will get an F1 visa when they're 20, right? So they don't have to leave and then go get another visa, right? They kind of do it right before they turn 21. They get an F1 visa. That's a student visa. Now you'd have to meet the requirements of a student visa, but that is a possibility. So keep that in mind. As far as separate applications, usually, especially if you go to the consulate, you will all go together. Kids who are 14 and older must attend an interview. Same for your spouse. Kids who are 13 and younger do not attend the interview, but you will bring their passport, and they should be located in the country where your interview is happening. Okay, so they need to be physically located in that country where the interview is happening. But they don't come to the interview unless they are 14 or older. Then kids have to go to the interview, as well as your spouse also has to attend the interview. Oh my gosh, let's see. Is it okay if I hire 4 or 5 part-time employees rather than any staff on payroll? And is it okay if I don't hire anyone in my first year? Okay, so first of all, we always recommend that you have at least one part-time US citizen or green card holder on staff at the time of application. So we normally will include the payroll documents in your application. Okay. Number 2, I think there might be a little bit of confusion about a W-2 versus a 1099. Those are two types of workers. So a W-2, these are US kind of tax terms, right? So a W-2 is somebody who's on payroll. They get paid in the US, it's commonly every 2 weeks. It's going to be taken out directly from the account. You're not going to be writing checks, things like that. The account, the bank account, the company bank account, you will set up a payroll system so all of their Social Security will be taken out. Local and state taxes, other federal taxes, that type of thing, automatically taken out. You do nothing. You just set it up with your bank. You say, hey, this person's going to get paid every 2 weeks. This is how much I'm paying them. The bank will handle the rest. That's a W-2 employee, okay? Somebody who's on payroll, has Social Security taken out, those types of things. So that's number 1. We always recommend that you have at least one part-time US W-2 employee at the time of application, and at least 5 W-2 employees at the time of your 5-year renewal. Okay, so after 5 years, you should have a minimum of 5 US employees. Now, obviously, that could change, right? What if you run a restaurant? You're probably going to need 10 employees, right? Because that's what makes sense. Let's go back to that accounting firm in Lincoln, Nebraska. Maybe you'll have 5, right? You might have 2 part-time, 3 full-time, right? So it really depends a lot on the business. It's the same answer as how many employees should I have is the exact same answer as how much should I invest. Nothing's ever going to be written down. But understand, this is called an investor visa, and one of their expectations is that you invest. The other is that you have US employment. Those are 2 of the main things with this visa. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Assuming you set up and run your U.S. company remotely and reinvest the profits from the U.S. company, can these profits be seen as investment before applying? No. Reinvestment is separate from investment, right? So those are two different ways that you can invest. Reinvesting revenues, which is okay, but it's not what they're looking for. They are looking for additional investment into the United States. So even if you are reinvesting the revenues, which most people do, you also need to have your personal investment that comes from one of your personal bank accounts. Or if a foreign entity owns the US entity, it needs to come from the foreign entity to the US entity and then spent. So reinvestment of revenues is a separate type of investment, not required. Looks cool, but what's required is this separate personal or corporate investment. Let's see, what do we got here? Let's see, property management companies suitable for investment? Yes, it can be. It can. We definitely have a video about this as well. So that's kind of a popular type of business for the E2 visa. And I would say that um, it's okay and it's fine and it can work. But here are the things that we always recommend for a property management firm: that you have two clients that are not you, not a company you own, not a company you own a part of. Two separate entities that are landlords that are paying you to manage their properties. So we usually require, at the time of application, two separate landlords and five separate doors. So that means one landlord has a house and one landlord has a fourplex. Or here's a landlord with a triplex, and here's a landlord with a duplex. Or, here are five separate landlords that each own one condo, or whatever combination, doesn't matter. And the more the merrier, obviously. If you have more landlords that have already hired you, that's awesome, right? But those are the types of things that we recommend, okay? Because they want you to have US clients. They don't want you just here kind of running your own duplex. That's not an E2 visa, right? That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for a business that has customers or clients and employees. So that's something really to keep in mind as well. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of the questions here. We're kind of coming up on time. Anything else further? Somebody who has not asked a question yet, have anything that they want to ask? Burning questions that they must ask? Otherwise, I can go through a couple of other questions that we got yesterday, which is fine. Okay, let me go through a couple of questions that we got yesterday, which are, give me a second. Do I want to run a restaurant, or can I run a restaurant for an E2 visa? And the answer is, of course, definitely. We've helped people do that. But, big but. So anytime you're opening any sort of client-facing, or I call it customer-facing business, meaning you have a physical space that people, your customers or clients, are coming to for you to sell them stuff, do services, whatever, doesn't matter. But if you have a client or customer facing office, you will be probably, depending on what it is, so this would count for a restaurant too, right? Because you have a commercial space that people are coming to for your thing, for your business. You will likely, it will take a little bit longer and potentially cost more money. And here's why. Anytime you have some sort of retail space like that where people are coming, usually you're going to want to decorate it, remodel it in some way. Now, if you want to throw a coat of paint up and put your sign up, you should be okay. However, if you're going to be doing remodeling, and this counts for the restaurant in particular, even if it used to be a restaurant, if you're moving the refrigerator, if you are, there's so many different things, you're going to need permits, okay? And depending on where you're doing this, it could take a while to get the permits. Then you've got the construction crew to come in. Then once they're done, the people that are offering the permits have to come back and make sure it was done correctly. I mean, I can have a couple of nightmare stories, right, of clients, unfortunately, that, I mean, they ended up getting the E2, which is great news, but it took a long time. I had one that did a dog grooming type business in Miami-Dade County, and it took more than a year just to get the permits. So Keep that in mind. I had another company that actually was just tutoring. It wasn't anything, they didn't have to get health and safety permits. They didn't need liquor licensing. They didn't need any of that. But when the fire department came in to sign off, they said, "Oh, your fire alarm is 6 inches too low. You need to get somebody to come in, move the fire alarm or the sprinkler system. Then we've got to come back. We have no openings to come back and check for the next 6 weeks." They were waiting all that time to get one person to sign off on one sprinkler system. Keep those things in mind. And the same goes for restaurants. Obviously, with the construction and things, we also have health and safety permits. So anytime you're serving food or something like that. And then, of course, a liquor license is a whole other beast. That's a whole other beast. That's a state by state thing, and it depends on where you're going to go. But just keep that in mind. So if you are in love with the idea of opening a restaurant, if you have a lot of experience running restaurants, that's your American dream, then you absolutely should do it. If you are just doing it because you thought, well, I don't know, it seems like the easiest one. It is not. Don't do it. That's what I would recommend there. Final question. Can I buy a business if it has an SBA loan on it? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you would want to take over an SBA loan. Certainly, I don't even know if you'd qualify for that because I don't know that they're going to assign a loan to a non-citizen, a non-resident. So you probably have to ask them about it. Because I don't know that would qualify, frankly. That's not an immigration question, by the way. That's just like, I don't know, you would have to check with SBA to see if that's even available, that you would have a non-resident, non-citizen. I mean, those are loans given by the government. Do you qualify for that? Could you ever even have that? I have no idea. I don't know. That's a non-immigration question. But my first call would be to the SBA people or an attorney who deals a lot with SBA loans or something and kind of give them the facts. I don't even know if that's eligible. Certainly no E2 investor should ever get an SBA loan. No, do not do that. Ever, never, ever, never as an E2 investor. All right, guys, I think that is a wrap. I hope you found this very useful. If so, please let people know. We'll try to do it every once in a while. And I hope to speak with some of you and help you in your E2 visas very soon. It would be a pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.